good morning. Happy Wednesday, everybody. I've got my cup of coffee. I say cup singular because if you were here on Sunday, you know I had several splayed out here, arrayed on the table that I use when I speak on Sundays and that we speak together on. Yeah, that's because I like my coffee, which is why we call this Coffee with PC. I got my mid-morning cup of Joe. Give me that pick-me-up for this midweek day. Thank you for taking a few minutes to join me, whether you've got your cup of coffee or not. I appreciate it because we try to look at, well, what we've been looking at is Matthew's account of the life of Jesus. And this cup seems appropriate because where we are in the story of Jesus' life is right around the end. And this cup, which is Da Vinci's Last Supper, as we said before, not an accurate depiction of how it would have looked, but a famous painting, a famous piece of art nonetheless. It's in this same night that the events happen that we're going to look at today. On the night that Jesus, he had his disciples together for what we call the Last Supper. And in the Apostle Paul's account, he puts it this way: on the night he was betrayed, that Jesus took bread and broke it. And what we're talking about today is that night, and specifically that betrayer. Judas himself. In fact, Matthew calls him in Matthew 26. He says, now the betrayer had arranged a signal. That's the epithet that sticks with Judas. That's what he's known for. He is the betrayer. It's not a reputation you want. And certainly Judas, for whatever reason, gets it. Obviously, the obvious reason he did betray, but I guess for whatever reason is all of the speculation that's gone on through church history and through commentators and pastors that have said, what was it? Did he have any sort of positive reason that he thought betraying Jesus? And I've heard lots of ones trying to put a spin on Judas that he thought he was doing a good thing. I don't know if that's the case. I know the scriptures talk about he was a devil from the beginning and all that sort of thing. So I will pretend not to have any knowledge of the whys and wherefores that went on in his mind, because the Bible isn't explicitly clear of what he was trying to accomplish, except that he went to the leaders and for 30 pieces of silver agreed to betray Jesus. I don't think, by the way, it was the money. Yes, Judas was the one who handled the money for the disciples. That shows up in another place. And so some have speculated it had to do with that. But 30 pieces of silver is not, I'm going to retire now kind of money. I don't think it was the money. And yet he agrees to do this. What really is startling to me, and maybe to you too, is when you think about Judas betraying Jesus, you think about what he had experienced. For 3 years, he had devoted his life to following Jesus. He had traveled with him. He had heard him preach and teach. He had seen with his own eyes miracles, yes, like healing the blind or the lame, or like feeding the 5,000, where he collected the extra leftovers afterwards, or even Jesus walking on water. And Peter following, all of these things that he had seen, and calming the storm. We could go miracle after miracle and teaching after teaching, well-known things. And we think if we had that kind of front row seat with Jesus, we would never betray him. And yet Judas does. And really whatever the motivation, whatever he was thinking, the really striking part of this and the thing that kind of lasts about Judas is it was the kiss with which he ultimately betrayed Jesus. The Judas kiss. It's kind of even a phrase that can be used to signal great betrayal. And that kiss is just remarkable to me, because it's a sign of affection, devotion, love. It's something that's meant to convey relationship, which Judas would have had. And I wonder why he chose a kiss. I mean, think about all the things he could have done. Think about all the ways, he had just been with Jesus at the Last Supper. He knew where they were in the garden. He could have just led them to there and said, when you get there, he's the one wearing this, because he had seen what he was wearing. He's the one that looks like that. Why couldn't he use it? Or he could have gone with him and just said, okay, that's him over there. Or if he was really angry at Jesus, if he really was feeling like Jesus had betrayed him in some way, had let him down in some way, maybe he slaps him or spits on him. Some of the things the soldiers would later do, maybe he could have displayed that. But the fact that he chose to use a kiss is really remarkable. And as I think about it, maybe it is a fitting symbol. Maybe we should consider the irony there and what we can learn from it. because Judas uses a symbol of affection outwardly, but inwardly, his actions, his motivations are the exact opposite. It's betrayal. There's even a word we have, a phrase we have. We talk about lip service. And in some ways, Judas has given the ultimate lip service to Jesus. He has, by his actions, or by his lips, we usually think of his words, but by his actions through this kiss, he has betrayed his true motives. And really, this is not a new problem. This is a problem that even the Old Testament prophets called Israel out on. That they were very quick to go through the motions to give the lip service to Jesus, but to have different intentions in their heart. In fact, Isaiah says in Isaiah 29:13, and it's repeated more than once in the New Testament. I think a couple times in the New Testament. I'm not sure. I'd have to look that up. But in Isaiah 29:13, he says, "These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me." They honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. We just spent months in the Sermon on the Mount. And even now, as we're in Matthew 23 and the woes to the Pharisees, part of Jesus' great criticism of people who claim to follow him is that the external doesn't match up with the internal. That the external actions, or in this case, words as lips, honor me with your lips, the external things don't match what's in the heart. The externals make you think, oh, this is a good and godly and religious person, but the heart has really no love or affection for Jesus. And that's what Judas literally betrays, an act of devotion that betrays a heart of betrayal. Maybe that's a little redundant, but nonetheless, I'll go with that. And we might think we would have never betrayed Jesus. If we had been Judas and seen what he had seen, experienced the teaching and the miracles, we would never have betrayed Jesus. But then I look at my own life and I consider the reality sometimes that we face, that there are times when we, sing a worship song on Sunday that talks about our great love for Jesus, or we offer a prayer in our churches or in our settings with other believers, or we do something of that nature. We read or quote a Bible verse. These outward actions that seem to show love for Jesus. And we do it because we're around others. Maybe we're in church or we're in our Bible study group or wherever we find ourselves around other Christians. But then later that week, instead of praise from our lips, there might be gossip or anger or frustration expressed. We might be people that instead of prayer publicly, when we're in our homes, the last thing we ever do is pray. We don't have that private inward devotion to Jesus that our public outward actions seem to indicate. And that's problematic. That's a betrayal. That's what Judas demonstrated, an outward action that wasn't consistent with his heart. That's what the children of Israel demonstrated, outward actions. They honored God with their lips. They prayed and they read the scriptures and they gave songs and psalms of worship, but their hearts and their lives looked much different the rest of the week. And that is exactly what we see in Judas. That's exactly what sometimes we need to be honest about seeing in ourselves. Does the outside, who are we in our relationship with God when no one's watching? When we're in that setting, in that Bible study, in that church, in that group, and we're praying together, we're reading the Bible together, all of those things, we're devout and we know the right things to say. But Monday morning or Thursday afternoon or Saturday night or wherever we find ourselves, are we consistent? Does our heart gravitate toward Jesus in our regular day-to-day life? Or is it more external when someone's watching? And I think the point that Judas's kiss makes, and the irony that it causes us to wrestle with, is where do we find that inconsistency in our own lives? Where is the outward not matched by the inward? God desires that we be transformed from the inside out. That's why it says, as we've said before, he gives us a brand new heart. We become new creations, because it's not just the outside that's the problem. It's not just take a bath. It's the heart. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And so that gossip or anger or hatred or cursing or whatever flows out of our mouth really shows what's on the inside, no matter what our religious actions show. It's a humbling reminder. We would think we would never betray Jesus, but sometimes I have to admit there are times I'm pretty inconsistent, and that's no different than the kiss that Judas offered Jesus with a heart far from him. So I want to challenge you with that, to honestly ask God to help you make sure your exterior actions, your public profession, your public demonstration of faith matches the interior heart, that your devotion, your love for Jesus isn't just for others to see, but it's true and authentic. And I'm so grateful that even when I blow it, even when I mess up, well, God is able to forgive. And the grace of God covers even that kind of a thing. And so when we recognize it, let's just be honest with God and say, okay, God, I messed up. Help me to do better next time. If we confess our sins, He is faithful and just to forgive us, even when we, like Judas, maybe betray a heart that doesn't follow Jesus, like our actions make us think. Well, I've been talking a lot about that today and over the last couple of sermon series, so I think we've made that point, but I think it's pretty important. It's something God's bringing home to me, a great reminder to me, especially as a pastor who stands before people. Make sure what I say isn't just for show, isn't just performative, but it matches the intent of my heart. It's a humbling reminder that I need to check myself, as we might say, and I hope you will too. Hey, I don't know what you're doing the rest of this week, but we would sure love to have you join us. And we're having dinner tonight. It's takeout only, starting at 4:30. We have our Parable Bible study night. And on Sundays, our big activity day with worship service. But even on Saturday, we have a back-to-school prayer bash for families. If you have a child going back to school, we'd love you to join us from 5 to 7 on Saturday to be a part of that preparation. Not just the buying the supplies and that sort of thing, but preparing our hearts, kind of what we're talking about today, to go back to school, to pray for our students, to pray for our teachers and leaders. So Saturday 5 to 7, or we'll honor some of our teachers and workers in our local school system Sunday at 9. Love to have you join us. We'll be here. Until then, hope to see you, but have a great week.